Hi everyone, welcome to Baking Nicky. In this recipe, I'm sharing with you my Fraisier cake, which is a beautiful strawberry cream cake. So I'm starting off by making the sponge cake layer. And this is a great all-purpose sponge cake recipe that is very neutral and you can use it for cake rolls and all sorts of things. So I'm gonna start by separating the egg yolks from the egg whites. I have 3 eggs here. I like to go ahead and put the egg whites straight onto a mixing bowl that I can later use to whisk the egg whites. For the egg yolks, it's okay enough to just put them in a small container because we will add this to the mixture later on. So once you are done with that, go ahead and prepare the dry ingredients. For this recipe, I'm using all-purpose flour and nothing else. Don't need any raising agent. And since we want to build as much air into this recipe as possible because of the lack of raising agents, then it's important to sift the flour very carefully, and we will build most of the air, of course, by whisking those eggs separately. So I'm starting by making basically a meringue. So you start with the egg whites and you gradually incorporate some sugar. So I typically add my sugar once I see that the egg whites are nice and frothy, and then just continue to whisk all the way until I have a really nice and glossy structure, almost like a meringue. And we've built a lot of air into this. Now it's time to add our egg yolks, and I'm doing this one at a time, again to try to preserve as much air in this mixture as possible. Now continue to mix this until it's fully incorporated, and when that's done, you are ready to add your dry ingredients and later on your fat, in this case melted butter that has been sitting at room temperature for a little bit. So I'm starting with the dry ingredients. I just sprinkle a little bit at a time, and I'm switching to a spatula so that I can do a folding motion. We're trying to preserve as much air in the batter as possible, and this folding method is key because it's one of the most gentle ways in which you can incorporate ingredients. So I'm adding my last bit of flour, and I'm gonna try to incorporate as much as possible at this point. And since we do not want to overmix, because overmixing means you knock out a lot of air, so stop with the folding if most of the flour has been incorporated and start adding that cooled butter. And the same goes for the butter. We add a little bit at a time and continue the folding motion. Once the butter has been thoroughly incorporated, you stop and you're ready to bake this. Now, before we can bake this, we have to prepare our baking tray. I have a baking tray lined with some parchment paper, and I've used a little bit of butter to secure the parchment to the tray so that it doesn't move as soon as I start spreading the batter around. So I like to take an offset spatula and try to aim for the corners first. And I'm trying to spread this as evenly as possible. Now, you might wonder why the parchment is hanging off of the tray like this. And this is on purpose so that when this is baked, I can easily just lift it out of the tray. So these are my parchment handles, so to speak. It can get pretty awkward trying to reach all those corners of the baking tray, so feel free to rotate as much as possible. I like to take my time doing this, and I'm doing it while my oven is preheating anyway. So a couple of taps on the counter to make sure we get rid of any visible air bubbles in there. And in the oven it goes at 180 Celsius for about 18 to 20 minutes. And you will know when it's done when you gently press it and it springs back instantly. Now, once the tray has cooled, you can go ahead and just pull from the side straight onto a cooling rack in one swift motion. And right now I'm just trying to get it out of the parchment paper. Now what we want to do is pull off the parchment. So for that, I'm just grabbing another piece, placing it on top, and then flipping it onto another tray so that the parchment that needs to be removed is at the top. So just start by peeling off, usually from a corner is best. Just pull gently. When you hit a rough spot, then just move around. Maybe go to the next corner and continue to gently pull on that parchment. And that's it. You can now store this while we prepare the rest of our setup in order to assemble the cake. I have a baking tray that I line with some silicone mat or parchment paper, that's just for easy cleaning. And I have a springform pan, and this is what I will use as a cake ring. We don't need the bottom, we just need the ring. And I have a great tip for assembling these kind of layer cakes, and that is to use acetate, because this will give you really nice and clean sides to the cake. So for the bottom layer, I'm gonna have a nice sponge cake layer. And I want the diameter of the circle to match the diameter of the cake ring. So I'm basically just using the base of the springform pan. And then running a knife around it will give us the perfect cake circle. And this is our base. This cake will have 2 sponge cake layers, and the second one will be about 2 inches smaller than the first, because we will have some strawberries blocking it and decreasing our diameter. Now for the star of the show, we have the freshest and most beautiful strawberries that I could find. And one thing to note is that, of course, you have to wash them and dry them a little bit. But what I like to do is pre-select them by size. I like to use the same size because visually it will make the cake and the layers look even. So all we need to do is halve about 8 to 10 strawberries for a 6-inch. And let's start building this. So I have my first layer of sponge cake, and I like to just spread a little bit of melted strawberry jam. This will give it some moisture and added strawberry flavor. So I have my strawberry halves here, and I'm placing it with the flat side facing the acetate. And I'm just neatly putting them as close to each other as possible. You don't want any gaps. If you find that you have some gaps, then start again and try to pick maybe bigger strawberries for one part. Now I have one whole recipe of creme diplomat, and this is just divine when you combine it with strawberries and this gorgeous sponge cake. So this is the classic technique for this cake, is to go in between the strawberries, and that's the first spot you want to cover with cream. Once that is done, you want to go ahead and cover the entire base with cream. And you want to be a bit generous here. You could add some strawberries to this, or just go ahead and dump that smaller circle of sponge cake onto that. We will go ahead and repeat by adding the layer of strawberry jam onto the sponge cake, and we're gonna cover this whole thing with the rest of the diplomat cream. You can be as generous as you like with this. I'm just trying to cover any visible bit of the strawberry. So this will depend on how big your strawberries are. So I just cover it to that point, and using a scraper or a spatula, just try to make it as even as possible, because we will go ahead and add another layer of strawberries to this. And visually, we want it to look nice and neat and nice and flat. Once you're happy with that, you can pretty much stop at this point and it will be an amazing cake, or you can further decorate it with some strawberry slices, for example, which is what I'm doing here. Now this is completely optional, but if you are gonna decorate the top with fruit, then I recommend that you protect your fruit with some nice glaze. And I've prepared that with a little bit of gelatin and some sugar. I will put the recipe in the ingredients list in the description box, don't worry about that. And I'm just glazing enough on top so that it covers all those strawberries and you have this very vibrant red strawberry color throughout the entire lifetime of the cake. So this has been chilling in the refrigerator for 2 hours. I think 1 hour is enough, but the longer the better. If you want to make this the night before, that's absolutely fine. So you can go ahead and place it on your cake plate. And once you're ready, you can remove that acetate as swiftly as possible, but also try to be careful. And let me show you those beautiful layers. This is the moment where you suddenly realize that everything you have done came together beautifully. Now, in order to get a beautiful slice out of my cake, I'm trying to use the strawberries on the top as a guide for my slice and cutting around those edges. And here you have it. Those layers are beautifully defined. This is certainly a dessert made to impress. It's delicious. I mean, what's not to like? You have that delicate diplomat cream and those super flavorful strawberries. This is the perfect summer cake recipe. So I hope you liked the video and the recipe, and please don't forget to like the video if you did enjoy it. Don't forget to click on that subscribe button and don't forget to share. I will see you next time with another delicious recipe. Thanks for watching.